Hello, Advanced Science Industries here. Today I'm going to be launching the very first piece of my first space station, the HSS. This first piece is the Heavy Tug. It is the largest piece of the space station, and it is meant to maneuver and place various pieces of the space station together. After this will come the launch of the core, and then the solar module, and then I'll be adding probably either batteries or the habitat modules or some fuel tanks. Rid of this solid fuel stage here. The first part of my asparagus staging is about to run out. There we go. So the reason to do that, what I've just done now, is I have a central column of fuel tanks and an engine, and then surrounding it I have 4 outer fuel tanks. Now 2 of these outer fuel tanks that are 180 degrees from each other, those ones fire at the same time and feed their fuel into the fuel tanks to their left and right. So what they end up doing is they run out of fuel first because they're feeding their fuel to the other 2 fuel tanks along with using it for propulsion. So when they run out of fuel, you eject those fuel tanks and you save weight while still managing to keep your central column and your other 2 column engines full to the brim. And when the outer tanks run out of fuel, I'll eject those and will be significantly lighter. Now I decided to launch this piece of the space station first because, well, one, it's the heaviest, and I'm going to be using probably the same launcher for all of the pieces of the space station, of course with slight modifications to accompany the different sized pieces. But for this one, I wanted to launch it first to actually see if I could push the launcher to launch something this heavy. The atmosphere actually extends up to 70,000 meters or 70 kilometers, and you want to make sure that you're above that, otherwise you'll have a fairly fast orbital decay as your ship tries to plow through the atmosphere. Just about halfway to the top of our orbit of 100,000 meters. So a lot of people like to complain about MechJeb. I'm sure you all know what MechJeb is, but in case you don't, it is an automatic, basically a computer system that will put you in orbit without any actual intervention. It does all sorts of interesting things. It tells you information as well. It's useful without easy mode, as some people will say. But what I like to use it for is I'll build and construct my launchers and the stuff that goes on top of them, and then I'll use MechJeb to launch it. And if MechJeb can make it into orbit with quite a bit of fuel left, then I'm fairly certain that I can as well, because MechJeb is a lot more efficient than I am. So it does have its hiccups, and it does take a little while, and it can be kind of boring watching it launch itself. I prefer to launch things on my own, but it is very useful data to make sure that you can actually reach in orbit without having to sit there and manually try it every time. So here I'm adding a maneuver node so that I can adjust my orbit so that my lowest point and highest point, the periaps and apoaps, are just about the same. Yeah, so I just accidentally pressed the space button to decouple my bottom stage. However, the engine is still firing. Now it seems to be relatively stable, so I'm going to turn on, well, I've already turned on the bottom engines for my Heavy Tug and helping that push it along. Oh, yeah, there it goes. It breaks away and goes off on its own path. Luckily, though, even though I've wasted fuel from that bottom stage, the nuclear engines that I have here are very efficient. Like, they're very efficient. They don't provide all that much force, but in space you don't really need it. You just need a lot of efficiency and time. For maneuver nodes, I burn halfway before I reach the maneuver node and halfway after. So if I have a burn of 2 minutes I will burn when I'm 1 minute away from it, and I'll burn for 1 minute afterwards. That way the force is spread out on both sides of the maneuver node, the point where you actually want to increase. So I have myself in orbit. Yeah. So what I'm doing now is I'm pointing my craft towards a north-south heading. And the reason I'm doing this is so that future pieces of the space station can also point in this direction, and it'll make everything a whole lot easier. Because if this thing is just pointing in a random direction, then that'll make it a whole lot more difficult to dock. However, there is an issue with this. The roll of the craft, the spinning direction, as it rotates around the planet, that will stay even relative to itself, not the planet. So I'll have to account for that later on. So here I'm just setting my target as the moon and checking my inclination. I am about 0.4 degrees, which I want to adjust that to 0 if possible. So I've got a very small burn, 16 meters a second. That's not very much delta V. But the node is in 20 minutes, so I'm going to time warp ahead. And then I'm going to burn in about 2.5 seconds. So I just want to make sure that I'm facing as close to north and south as I can, because later on I'll be docking the core module, which will attach right to that docking port at the bottom. Well, that's it. The Heavy Tug is in orbit, and I will be adding the core to it next episode. Thanks for watching. As always, keep looking towards the sky.